Welcome to the Rural Pastor Podcast with your host, Andy Addis, and special guest, Mark Clifton.
We plant the seeds in the ground, though the fields have long been brown. But Lord, when will your harvest come in? I'm giving all I've got to give in the place where I've been sent. But will my labor make much difference in the end? Will no one ever know? Sometimes I feel so all alone. Like the prophet Jeremiah, you may be the one to go to the dying and the broken with a message of hope. To that church on the corner of that forgotten little town, to a room of empty pews where his love can still be found. You may never know of all the seeds you sow, but it just takes one willing soul to make him known.
It just takes one willing soul to make him known. That's what this podcast is for. You, that one willing soul. The ruralpastorpodcast.com. We are here to pour into, partner with, and pat on the back the rural pastor because we believe in what you're doing, that it's so important, and you are not alone. My name is Andy Addis, and I have the privilege of volunteering as a rural strategist for the North American Mission Board Replant Team, and I pastor a multi-site network of churches for rural America based out of Hutchinson, Kansas. And I'm here with my special guest co-host every week. Would you please introduce yourself?
Hey, man, it is Mark Clifton from Basehor, Kansas. Glad to be with you today, Andy. Always delighted.
We haven't talked about it in a while. You're in Basehor, Kansas, but tell us about your church.
My church is in Linwood, Kansas, it's Basehor Linwood school system. So, it's one of those things. They combine the schools. Linwood is, 8 miles or so from where I live right now. It's a town of 400, probably less people, kind of off the beaten track, not on a main highway, on a blacktop. But it's a great little town that I dearly love. About got destroyed by a Category 4 tornado 2.5 years ago.
Really?
But has come back pretty well. And got a Dollar General just this past December.
And you guys are still celebrating that, aren't you?
We are still celebrating that. That's true, because we didn't have any stores at all. We had the Taillights Tavern and the gas station. Those are the two things we had.
Well, and the reason I wanted you to talk about it for just a second is as people are joining us, we're on episode 7 here. If you've missed some of the beginning stuff, you need to know that we have the big fancy microphones and the ability to connect and record. But my brother here, he does know rurality. And
I do.
If your big claim to fame is a Dollar General, that should be one of the definitions of rural, right?
I think so. Although we don't feel rural now. I mean, you can walk in Dollar General and buy anything. I mean, that changes the whole dynamic of a community.
Does it?
Before I had to go 9 miles to get to the store. It does. It does. I can get helium balloons now. Can you imagine that? I can get a helium balloon in Linwood. That is amazing.
Okay, see, that proves you are rural. And now, see, I consider myself rural too, but I'm the other end of rural. I'm the town that has the Walmart for everybody in the area, right?
Oh, yeah. Right.
In Hutchinson, Kansas. Well, we're here again for the Rural Pastor. Thank you so much for joining us, Mark. And we have been on a journey including this one, 3 episodes, of rolling through one of the principles in a free ebook that is available to you that's called Doing More Together. And it's basically the story of the Crosspoint ministry and how it went from a small neighborhood declining church to a rural multi-site. And it points towards some resources that are available to everybody called the replanthub.com. But one of the principles in the book is this: Bible preaching, relationship, and vision are the holy trifecta of a healthy church. Now, we've talked about Bible preaching, we've talked about relationships, and we've decided that we need whole other episodes to continue those topics. And
on both of those, we need a whole episode on how to formulate a sermon.
Yep.
And we need a whole episode on how to create really lanes for relationships and how to determine who gets into those lanes.
So we got
need
our
to
work
do
cut
a
out for
couple
us,
of those.
right?
Yeah, we
Well,
do.
the last one in this, and when I make this statement, if you get a chance to read the book, this is kind of an appendix for it in audio format. But we saw some initial growth as that declining neighborhood church simply by making really zero changes except a commitment to biblical preaching, pastoral relationships with people, and establishing a vision. But I would say this, a big vision. So there's a phrase out of the commercial world called BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal, right? And I love this because sometimes we say, well, here's the goal for our ministry, and then we wonder why God doesn't help us with it. Well, it was such a small goal. You don't even really need help with that. It was something you could accomplish. I love it when we put big, hairy, audacious goals out there. Things that if God doesn't show up, you're going to look the fool. To be honest with you, you're right that you feel like His leading you in that direction would cause you to move in that. And if He doesn't show up, you're going to be in trouble. So let me ask you: in your ministry, have you ever put any of those out in front of yourself? Have you ever established any of those big, hairy, audacious goals?
Yeah, I think so. Certainly, even here at Linwood, when I showed up in May of 2020, had 3 members. And of course, it was in the height of COVID, but I mean, that's all that was left were 3 members.
Right.
And when I look back at their history in the last 5 years, they had never averaged more than single digits on any year in worship. So they were always 7, 8, 9 people. I don't know how they hung on as long as they did. So they were down to just 3 remaining members, and they were putting the church up for sale. The Methodist church in town already closed their doors and was gone. And so the Baptist church was going to follow suit and do the same thing. And they let me become their pastor. And so Jill and I went to be the pastor and wife there. And we started with experiencing God on Wednesday nights. We weren't meeting on Sundays yet. And we began to attract a few people from the county and from the region and from the city, from the town. And we began to say, well, God's at work all around us. He's at work here in Linwood. So what would He have us do? And so our big, audacious goal was not to grow the church, not to see if we can turn the church into 25 or 30 people, but how can we make this community noticeably better? Here we are, a church of 5 or 6 people, right? And a church ready to close its doors. And how can we make this community noticeably better? And so we set some big goals out there that we were going to really impact the community for the good. And long story short, I won't get into all of it, but we've had a couple of large events. We've had community-wide concerts, community-wide fairs. We've had 400 and 500 people show up, more than people who live in town. They had never had a Christmas parade. We did a nighttime Christmas parade. They had about 30 different vehicles in it, 30 different floats. The town was packed with people. People look at us all the time and say, how do you do all of that? Well, we don't. God is at work in this community. Amen. And we set some pretty big goals, like you said, a big vision. People are attracted to a big vision. Oftentimes when they come to a real church, there's just no vision there at all. Now, it's risky. I get that. And you need to make sure that you're really in tune with the Holy Spirit. I would suggest you spend some time doing experiencing God and letting people see that God is at work and how can we join Him in that. But I do want to say one other thing, Andy. When Paul is talking to Timothy in 1 Timothy, and Timothy's thinking of leaving, because in the very first chapter, the very first few verses, Paul says, I urge you, as I did when I was in Macedonia, to remain at Ephesus. So he's wanting to leave. And so when he gets later in the book, when he gets to the nuts and bolts of what to do with these dysfunctional people, one of the first things he says is, have them pray for the whole world.
Oh, yeah.
They got all kinds of problems at Ephesus, but Paul says the first thing you do is you pray for the whole world.
That's great.
The whole world, Andy.
That's
great. Not just Ephesus, not just Asia Minor. Get your people together in this little dysfunctional church and pray for the whole stinking world to know the gospel. That's Paul's way of saying we got to have a vision as big as God and quit looking at the tiny little stuff and the little problems that we have. And I think that's a really important point.
It reminds me of a great sermon that I heard that kicked off the Southern Baptist Convention this last year, in which there was a guy who said this, that one of the signs of a dying church is that they focus on what they don't have instead of what they do. And what they do have is the risen Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, It's true.
That was you,
Absolutely
by the way,
right.
if you don't remember
I know.
that.
Well, it came from Henry Blackaby, so there you go. But yeah,
Nothing new,
No,
man. That
absolutely
came out of
right.
the Bible. That's where that came out of.
that did. It came out of the Bible. That's right.
Okay, so these big, hairy, audacious goals. Now, sometimes we confuse. We say vision, goal. Well, I think one of the things that helped Crosspoint grow is that we made our mission and our vision a goal. We made a metric out of it. I'm of the old school. I believe that if your church has a vision statement, and don't we all have one of those in a folder somewhere? It's 3 paragraphs long, to glorify God as we continue.
Yeah.
Nobody knows what it means.
Right.
But I believe personally that the vision of every church is the Great Commission. We don't have if you're a church and Jesus is Lord, then you don't have a chance to change that. But we quantified it. And early on, when we were just this small church of 100 and some people, our community, like I said, if you take all the surrounding area, we're 30-some thousand people. We rounded up to 40,000 and said, we want a church that tithes the city. Right, we want to give 10% back, and that meant we wanted 4,000 people in church. Now that's just ludicrous. It's asinine, if you could use the right word for it. But what it did is it absolutely set the bar and said, we're expecting God to do something here. We're expecting for him to move. And yes, I think some people showed up just because they wanted to see the dumpster fire, right? Want to say there's no way this is going to happen. And others were like, this is absolutely worth it. I think, I know I'm interrupting myself here. I think one of the reasons we see an absence of a lot of men in the church is because we don't have anything to hunt, right? We don't have anything to challenge.
Yeah. I spent the first half of my ministry, first 2/3 of my ministry in church planting. And one thing you know about church planting, it's filled with young men. Any church plant you go to, unless it's a church split, I mean a legitimate church plant, is going to have an abundance of young men between the ages of 18 and 30. It's going to have more of those, and it's going to have older men. Why is that? Because young men are attracted to a challenge and to a vision. And church plants are full of challenges. Sometimes in our rural churches, there's no more challenge. The building's paid for. Somebody takes care of the grounds. There's no needs. Everything's taken care of. And there's no vision. We've been here for 140 years. We have Sunday school and morning worship, and we take care of each other, and that's about it. There's no vision. There's no challenge. And you really have to set that before people, and you've got to come up with that. And again, I go back even to where I'm at Linwood. This isn't our church's mission. I mean, our mission is to spread the gospel, the Great Commission. I could talk more about that. But if you're a member at Linwood Baptist Church, you know that we exist to make this community noticeably better. You just know that. That's just whether it means mowing people's yards, whether it means having free Zumba classes, which we do once a week, whether it means having free music classes, having free music concerts, letting them use our building for funeral dinners or for birthday parties or for bridal showers. Whatever it is, we want to make the community noticeably better. That's our vision. Now, we only have 400 people in this community, only 40 or 50 people in our church, but we're going to make this community. Why do you do that? Because those who've been dealt most generously with should be the most generous people in the community. And nobody's been dealt more generously with than those of us who've been redeemed. So out of that generosity of God's grace, the community should be better because people who've been redeemed are generous and compassionate, and that should express itself in the community. And so, here's, you say, well, one of the things you can do is this. I always want to give people handles. Here's your church budget. All right, this is how much money you take in. This is how much you spend. What would you do if you had literally almost an unlimited budget? How would you minister to people? How would you do things? And start listing those. Don't let your budget limit you. That's what we often do. Well, I hear guys all the time say, Mark, we don't have the money to put on a concert like you did. I said, well, neither did we. We don't have the money to bring in the Chiefs mascot, and pay him. We did that. We brought him in 3 or 4 times. He's come in for the parades, for the concerts. We just brought him in and used him at the school across the street from us just to do a rally.
That's awesome.
We paid for it. They go, we don't have that kind of money. Well, we don't either. Look at our budget. It's not in the budget. What you do is you say, here's what we would do if we had the money. And you can come up with 2 budgets. You can have a budget that pays the bills, that provides the insurance, that handles the expenses of the. Then you can have this faith budget. You say, you know what? If we had the money, these are the things we would do. And then this is what happens, Andy. If you'll do that and you'll head in that direction, God will resource his plans for your church.
Absolutely.
And resources always flow toward activity, guys. Southern Baptist resources flow toward activity. So what happens is a church will contact us, and I'm telling you, they do, and they say, "Hey, we hear you're doing some good things down there. How could we help?" "Well, we want to do this." "Well, yeah, we'll be glad to do that." And so we at the end of the year, we look at it, we go, "Look what God has done." He's funded these things that we ask him to do. That is vision, Andy. If you don't have the vision to come up with these things, you just say, "We don't have the money, we don't have the people, so we can't do it," then you're just stuck on zero. You've got to have that kind of vision. And if you're a rural pastor and you don't have that kind of vision, I want you to, if you're in an area where there aren't any church planters, then go online and look at the SEND network, SEND network for Southern Baptist at NAM. Look at some of the resources the SEND network has for church planters. They got some great resources that are there. And if you are in a community where there are some church planters nearby you, see if you can hang out with some of them, because church planters are all about vision. And you just kind of need to catch that from them.
Vision is contagious. There is no doubt. And as you're talking about this, I think one of the reasons that people shy away from big vision, big goals, and scalable. I mean, I say that we want to tithe our community. You said that Linwood's about 400, and that you're running 40 or 50. You're already doing that. I mean, you're tithing the community, and we have a belief. We've seen it at a couple of our locations that when you start to tithe the community, when 1 out of every 10 people at Dollar General goes to your church, when 1 out of every 10 kids at the school there, you're no longer a church in that community. You're that community's church, and you can start to really be a culture shifter. But the reason that so many times pastors are shy away from that is we're afraid of failure. But let me just, have you ever seen Mount Rushmore? Have you ever actually seen it?
Yes, I've been there. Yes,
it's amazing, isn't it? We spent 2 weeks there on vacation. Loved it. Let me give you some stats here. The plan for Mount Rushmore was that it would be a 5-year project costing $500,000. That was the plan. 5 years, $500,000. Here's the reality. It took 14 years. It cost $1 million. And guess what? It's not even finished. Did you know George Washington's supposed to go down to his waistcoat? Abraham Lincoln's got an arm pointing off into the future. That's not even there. So they were more than triple the time, double the budget, and unfinished. What an amazing failure that was.
Yeah.
No,
I get it.
It's a national monument. If you set a big enough goal, here's the deal. If we say we want to reach 40,000, if there's 40,000 people, we want to reach 4,000 people. We only have a church of 2,000. What a waste. Yeah. What a horrible church in that community.
Yeah. And let me give you we did back when I was a church planter. Let me give you this insight, and maybe this will help you guys who are in rural places like me. And rural people are not the biggest risk takers in the world. Let's be honest. Now they're risk takers if they're farmers and ranchers, because you have to be in order to be a farmer and a rancher.
It's high stakes gambling.
It's a different kind of risk. It's a risk they feel like they know something about.
Right.
Whereas when you're talking about your church, in fact, sometimes rural people live much risk of markets and weather and things there's even here some of our cattle guys are talking about a new thing something that the deer have that gets into the liver of the cows or something, but it's a new problem they've got. So there's all kinds of things they can't control. So sometimes when rural people get to church, they don't want to take any risk because they got all these other risks in other parts of their life.
Makes sense.
But you can talk about, in church planting, we used to do this a lot. We'd say, we're going to try something here. We're going to have an experiment. Let's see what we can learn if we decide to have a free garage sale and give things away. What can we learn about our church, learn about our community? Let's try something. Let's see if we could talk to the school, talk about having somebody come in and talk about encouraging students, like we did with the Casey Wolf character from the Chiefs. What might that look like? And, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. We're going to learn from it. Don't create necessarily always win-lose scenarios up front. Be cautious about that. But you create an environment where people are willing to try things, have some experiments, learn from them, and then say, we never fail. We always learn something about ourselves, about our community, about how to do something better next time. We're always on a learning curve. We're learning our way into the future. I say that all the time. We're learning our way into the future. And this is part of learning our way in the future, is to experiment with these things and see where God is at. And again, you go back to doing experiencing God, like we talked about in a previous podcast, then you see where God is at work and you join him in it. And so these things are like probing into the community to see where he's at work. And if you never probe, you never have a vision, you just stay within yourself, you'll never discover where he's working around.
Let me give you a quote. It's a Barna quote from the Journal of Applied Christian Leadership regarding vision, because I think this lines up with so much of what you're saying. It says, vision is specific, detailed, customized, distinctive, and unique to a given church. It allows a leader to say no to opportunities. It provides direction. It empowers people for service, and it facilitates productivity. In other words, a vision statement isn't just a unifier or something to put on the wall. It is actually directional. It can give you a filter by which you make decisions as to what you will and you won't do. And that's why it's so important, right?
Right. And guests are visitors, guests, to the degree that you have them in a rural area, are attracted to a church that has a vision, that feels like it's going somewhere, that it has a purpose, that it's doing something.
Amen.
That's very important.
Now,
that just snowballs on itself.
You know, this is a secular illustration. Some people have probably heard, a lot of people probably have, but it bears repeating. The whole NASA story. If you know NASA, we know them today, the National Aeronautics Space Administration. You know, they put people on the moon. They're in charge of the shuttle. They're doing all that kind of stuff. But at one point, they were an underfunded, not known entity in the government, and then a president made a speech, said we're going to put a man on the moon. It became a matter of a Cold War race, and all of a sudden they had funding and everybody's attention was there. And there's this great story. Did you know this, by the way? I was a journalist before I was a pastor, so that's why this.
I did not. Yeah, I did actually. I did know that. Yeah, I did know that. You did tell me that.
They were having a press tour through NASA. And all these journalists are trying to get the scoop on each other. And so they're talking to these astrophysicists and astronauts. And one of these guys slips away and he finds the janitor, right? Nobody's talking to the janitor. And the janitor's just emptying a trash can into his rolling dumpster. And he says, "What do you do around here?" And the guy looked at him and said, "I'm putting a man on the moon." Now that is vision, right? When the guy emptying the trash cans goes, no, I'm not the janitor. I'm helping put a man on the moon. That's what we do. Yeah. That's what vision does for a church. It's not like, well, I park cars. Nope, we're reaching 10% of this city. I'm changing diapers. Nope, we're reaching 10% of this city. We're going to hit a tipping point for Jesus in this community. That's what vision will do for you.
Right. And some of you guys may, in a rural setting, you may have to start really slow. This is something new for your folks, but maybe you could start by checking with the IMB, International Mission Board, and asking if your church can adopt and pray for an unreached people group. And say, who's gonna deny that? And so you've got a vision of this unreached people group, and you put it on the map in the church, and you figure out a way to strategically pray for them, and that's your vision, that this group will be. That's a step in the right direction. Doesn't cost anything. There's not a lot of risk involved, but all of a sudden you're seeing beyond yourself, and you're seeing beyond your little community, beyond your county, and you're seeing that your church could have an impact globally. So begin with that. And then again, talk to the nonprofits in your community. You don't have to reinvent opportunities for ministry. They're already there. Talk to the food banks, talk to those who deal with all kinds of drug addiction and rehabilitation. Talk to any place in your community that has nonprofit service, and see if there's a way your church could kind of come alongside them, strengthen them, learn from them, and just begin to find ways for your church to, when it gets together on Sunday morning, to celebrate the ministry footprint that you have, and begin to set a vision for people that we're here to do more than just gather on Sunday morning and maybe Wednesday night. We're here to let the gospel be made known and make sure this community is noticeably better, because the people who love Jesus show up here, and this is where we live.
And to be a part of something that God's moving in, right? Not just we're creating, but we can see this is a big enough deal that God is showing up in this thing.
Absolutely. And that happens all the time. We had a free garage sale. We just invited churches in the county to bring their stuff and put it on our front lawn on Wednesdays and Thursdays. And then Friday and Saturday, we just advertised through social media that everything you want, you come and take. It was an amazing success. It cost us nothing to do it. And it brought all kinds of benefit to people. It got people to clean out their garbage, but it also got people who needed things. And we had some people, listen, I had some guys, I had a brand new 45-inch flat screen TV this guy brought.
Good grief.
So this guy shows up, in town. He walks over. He goes, "Is this free?" I said, "It's absolutely free." He said, "It can't be free." I said, "It's absolutely free." He couldn't believe that we gave away a flat screen TV. I had a washer and dryer. It was almost brand new. There was a couple in town that really needed a washer and dryer. Again, the same kind of thing. What a joy. I mean, that was the first thing we did when we started reaching the community. That really set the tone. There was a lady who moved in across the street. She took her brother's house. I think he'd passed away. And she walked over and she said, "I just moved in here. I don't have any furniture." I said, "Man, you have come to the right place. Pick out a couch. Listen, pick out a couch, pick out a kitchen table and chairs, pick out a bedroom set." She picked it all out. And our men in our church carried it across the street and put it in her house.
That's so fantastic.
Now, this is a church at that time, we might have had 15 members. That's the kind of way you set vision. You go, we're going to make a difference in this community. And we're going to do it because God is here and he's working. And that has just, that kind of stuff, you do that over and over and over. And you're right, the community begins to see you, listen, not as a taker, but as a giver.
Right.
And that's really important.
That you're adding to the community. Now let's just say we don't have much time left here, but let's just say we do have a vision. We do have a goal, and mission, vision, goal. They're all a little bit different, but you have one of these, and you want to move in that direction. It's one thing to have it and be excited about it. It's even one thing to communicate it. But what is the direction that you need to give to it? And let me give you this advice, that you need to move from lag measures to lead measures in all of these big goals. Now, a lag measure, let's use baptism. Let's just say you had a baptism goal. So our baptism goal is 300. Well, what are your lag measures? Well, did we get those baptisms? Let's say we're going to have 30 baptisms next year. Well, did you get them? Well, that doesn't do you any good because that was your goal. That doesn't help you get to your goal. A lead measure then is, how many times are we going to preach about baptism? How many times are we going to offer baptism? How many times are we going to have a conversation about baptism? And we say we're going to preach on baptism once a quarter. We're going to schedule an outdoor baptism service at the end of summer at the City Water Park. Those are the lead measures. So one of the things that we get guilty of is we get a great vision, a great goal, but we then don't plan anything metrically to help us move in that direction. So just from one pastor to another, if you've got a great vision and a great goal, then move yourself in a direction to achieve that goal. Don't just measure whether you got it or not, but plan the lead measures that would move you in that direction. Does that make sense, Mark?
No, it does. And even on baptisms, maybe you haven't had a baptism in your church in 2 or 3 years. And I know sometimes guys feel really guilty about that. And I know sometimes you feel like you're really dumped on by other people, denominational leaders, because we've got 5,000 churches that didn't baptize anybody, and you probably don't need that added shame and guilt placed on you. You're probably not really happy about that either, right?
Yeah, that wasn't your goal to hit.
No, that wasn't your goal. But I think rather than just be frustrated with that, there are things you can do. I would even suggest something as simple as cleaning out the baptistry and going ahead and filling it full of water.
Great.
And then just getting in it one Sunday and say, we haven't had anybody baptized here in 2 years. God's the one who brings people to salvation. We don't. But I'm here in this baptistry water this morning. I just want to remind you, we have a baptistry, how exciting it would be to see people in it. Would you join me this morning? Maybe even if you're just 25 or 30, come on up here on the platform and get close. Maybe some of the pictures here in the water. Would you just pray with me that we'll be bold in our witness, that somebody in this room today is going to be able to invite somebody to church or share Jesus in a way? That's what I'm talking about. There are ways you can do that begins to engage people in that. And then let me tell you what happens. If you actually have someone come to faith in Christ and gets baptized in the next 6 or 8 months, whoa, that's going to that church is going to go, wow, there's something going on here now.
Yeah.
So those are ways you can do things like that.
Well, and then I'm 100% with you. Post those lead measures, things like that.
Yes.
And that's great. Then celebrate those things. Don't let them fade, man. Record that thing. Post it. Yeah. Remind yourself of it. Share it with everybody that you can. Just in all that, I want to give you one last story as we're kind of moving towards the end here. And again, isn't it funny? Every one of these, we could do a whole nother episode on just this stuff. But I told you at the beginning that we're a multi-site network, but for our broadcast center, we have a location. We wanted to reach 4,000 people, which just is crazy, I know. But in the Christmas of 2019, we've become known in our area as kind of the Christmas Eve service church. Everybody comes and so it's really started to grow. It's the high point of the year. In 2019, we had been on an upward trend. It was long before the pandemic and everything was still going well. We knew we had to add some room, so we decided to open some lead measures up. We had Christmas Eve and Christmas Eve, and then we had Christmas Adam services. We did 3 days in a row. We did 8 services to just open it up as much as we could. When we got done, we looked at the numbers, and we were celebrating. We knew they were good, but there were 4,046 people who had come through the doors. And at the beginning of 2020, before everything was falling apart, we had a staff meeting, and somebody went, "Wait, that's what it looks like." We're not there. We average less than half of that every weekend. Still substantial. We're thankful for it. But if we get our goal, when we get to our goal, that's what it looks like. It looks like 8 services in a row, covering 3 days. And they were like, "We're exhausted, but man, was it totally worth it." It was that moment, bit by bit, opening up lead measures. We got a glimpse of it, and the vision that in that room of just staff who are like, "That's what it looks like. That's what it'll be like." Yep. It was tangible and a beautiful moment.
And if you're listening to us, if you have a hard time wrapping your mind around those kinds of numbers, go back to what I just said about baptisms. Just one, just get your people engaged in just one, or just get your people engaged and say, "You know what, this coming year in 2022 and 2023, we're going to find 2 or 3 ways we're going to be able to look back and say the community is blessed because we were here." And then once you do that, celebrate it, rejoice in it, let people know the experience. And that begins to help them realize that buying into vision is a very positive thing. And absolutely, guys, listen, to the degree that you're focused on vision and on going someplace together, there's a direct correlation between that and the lowering of conflict within your church.
Amen.
I promise you that. I'm not going to say there's not conflict, because there is conflict when you start doing things. But once you're heading in that direction, once you've got momentum, once you're following that vision, your energy is much more focused outward. That's why I go back to what I said before. I think when Paul's talking to Timothy in Ephesus, he says that get them to pray for the whole world to come to know Jesus. Get them to quit looking just at themselves and look at the whole world, and get them a larger perspective. And sometimes in a rural church, the hardest problem you've got is helping them look beyond their little 1-acre plot there where the church is located, maybe the cemetery next to it. They don't think they can. They don't think they have the resources. They don't have the people. They say they don't have the ministry opportunities. We're out here in the country. Go to the county, find ways they can help. And I'll be real quick about this. When I was an interim pastor for a while up in rural North Missouri, again, a little country church with a cemetery next to it, no town anywhere near it. The nearest town was a town full of Amish people, Jamesport, Missouri. So even the town was filled with Amish people. So they were like, but an hour and a half away was Kansas City. We had this homeless ministry in Kansas City called Set Free Church. And the Set Free guys were raising their own support and doing their own work. And they were working on cars and mowing yards and stuff. Long story short, I got those older gentlemen up at that rural church to go down and spend some time with these homeless guys who were just learning how to do work working on cars or mowing yards. And they began to share tools with them. They began to share insight with them. And there was this wonderful relationship that developed between these rural North Missouri guys and these really street guys who just come to know Jesus down in the inner part of Kansas City. I have seen it happen. It can happen. And when it does happen, the church has a whole new vision. Amen. And I'm not suggesting in any way, shape, or form, gentlemen, that this is because of what I did up there a few years ago. But that little church is a rural church. It's added to its building. It continues to grow. It continues to do well. It's the Shelburne Baptist Church up near Trenton, Missouri, if you want to know where it is. It continues to do well. They had a passion for Kansas City. They got a passion for missions. I'm telling you, there's a direct connection between vision and passion and focused on the outside, and you lower that conflict that you tend to have when you don't do that.
And I think that what you're talking about, that there's a scalability to it that creates that unity. So like the next thing I'm doing when I get done with this, I've got another call to make, and I'm going to be online with one of our location pastors out your direction in Osawatomie, Kansas.
Yeah, Osawatomie. Yeah.
And he preached
John Brown. You know, that's a whole different story.
The whole history piece there.
Yeah, that's right.
But he preached, and I got an iPhone recording of it, and we evaluate each other in our preaching. And so I watched as he faithfully, he pounded out a great message, dropped a bomb on Proverbs, did so good. And I counted, I think, 6 people that he was preaching to. So here we are with the same vision, the same statement, the same label, but it's the same God, whether it's a church of 6 or a church of 1,600. It's the same vision because it's scalable to our communities, and the same value over the work that's being done in those places. That is just as much Crosspoint as is Hutchinson. Osawatomie and Hutchinson, they're both Crosspoint. They're both in that place because it is that vision and that passion for the gospel that binds us together to make a difference in our communities. Amen?
Good word. Good word. Hey, thank you guys for listening. Thank you for the work you do in rural America. You are not forgotten. You are important. We don't know how many people live in rural America. Depends on who you talk to.
That's right.
Somewhere between 30 and 60 million people live in rural America. And it is a growing number. And one of the things we might want to talk about someday in the future is the changes in rural America. As more urban people move to the rural areas to work remotely, that's going to bring all kinds of challenges. So we'll talk about that. I was thinking about that this week. Even here where I am, we've got people who work remotely that would never have lived in the rural areas 10 years ago.
It's a great word. And I hate to be overprotective, but I'm like an Elon Musk on this. He says, I moved here from California. If you follow me, don't bring California with you.
Yeah, I know. I know.
Well, listeners, we've been talking about vision. Habakkuk 2:2 says this, and the Lord answered me, write the vision, make it plain on tablets, so he may run who reads it. Man, isn't that the word? We need to run, and when we read it, and may God bless. What a beautiful opportunity to be a part of what God can do in these small places. It is important. You're important. Share this with others and help us spread the word about the ruralpastorpodcast.com.
Like the prophet Jeremiah, you may be the one to go to the dying and the broken with a message of hope. To that church on the corner of that forgotten little town, to a room of empty pews where his love can still be found. You may never know of all the seeds you've sown, but it just takes one willing soul to make him known.
Thank you so much for joining us at the ruralpastorpodcast.com. A special thanks to Chosen Road for this incredible theme music, to 180 Digital, our corporate sponsor, and you can check out both of them at our website as well as other resources, because you're not alone. And Rural Pastor, we believe in you at the ruralpastorpodcast.com.